Here are 3 ways to add color to your texture paste, the common mistakes people make with them, and how you can avoid those mistakes. And if you don't know what texture paste is, it's a paste that's used to create 3-dimensional structures or textures on arts and crafts. And rather than texture paste, some brands call theirs modeling paste or molding paste, and it's basically the same thing. Texture pastes are designed to be used with acrylic paints. So not oil, not watercolor, not gouache, but acrylic paints. And the first way is to wait for the textures to fully dry and then paint on top of them. And this method results in the most rich and vibrant color, and I use this method with designs like these. Classic textured art often features simple uniform colors, but that doesn't mean that we cannot layer acrylic paints with textured art like we normally would. Let me give you a quick example of how to do that. So this is the coastal painting we created together in the earlier video. I'll just grab some Russian blue acrylic paint and some titanium white, and then we start layering the paint, starting with the darker color. So I'm just creating the base of the ocean. Then as we get closer to the shore, I'm tinting it down with some white, and by the time I got here, this section is almost dry. We'll go over it again, and that way we can quite easily get this layered coloring on our artwork. Painting on top of the dry textures is usually the safest option because we're not modifying the paste before we're using it. And the common mistakes here are not using enough paint or painting too few layers, stop and go marks, so uneven brush work, and using too fluid acrylic paint. And the first 3 mistakes result just in an uneven and splotchy look. And fixing these are easy, you simply paint over it again. And the last mistake can cause some problems with the water-based texture paste, so soaking the paste with very watery acrylic paint is not recommended. And to get the clean, uniform color, we're gonna do long, even strokes across the pattern. It's better to do multiple coats of paint to get full coverage rather than trying to use too much paint in a single layer. Excess paint easily gets stuck in all the nooks and crannies of the textures. And the second method to add color to your textures is to mix the paint directly with the paste. And I use this method especially with designs like these. And when we're adding color to a white paste, it always tints down slightly. So the end result is not exactly the same as you'd get using paint straight from the tube. And for optimal results here, you want to use a good quality acrylic paint that's well pigmented, as well as good quality texture paste that's thick enough so you can mix paint into it. And I mostly use this brand I cannot even pronounce, as well as Liquitex, but you can of course use whatever paint you want. A common mistake here is mixing too much paint with the paste. When you're adding something fluid like paint to a paste, the combination of the two has a more runny consistency than the paste alone. So the more paint you add to the mix, the more fluid it becomes, the less consistency the paste holds, and the more likely it will crack. And for these reasons, I prefer to paint over the textures rather than color them directly, unless painting over them afterwards would be too difficult to do cleanly. And an example of this is petals. It's a lot easier, at least for me, to create a colored petal directly rather than painting the petals afterwards without messing with the background color. If you need to mix in a lot of acrylic to your paste, you can switch from the normal soft body acrylic to heavy body acrylics. The heavy body acrylic has a lot thicker consistency and it doesn't make the paste as runny. A few years ago, I saw this demonstration about how much more interesting a surface is when it's not just one clean uniform color. And the example used was 2 rocks, one that's completely painted in one color and one natural rock. This is a matter of taste, but I do find the natural rock a much more interesting surface to look at. And this example relates to our third method of applying color, which is something I call the partial mixing technique. And I use it to create designs like these. It's a bit like the previous method, but rather than mixing the color fully to the paste, we only mix it partially. So we take some paint and we go maybe once and then we scoop it up. So we only mix it a little with the paste, leaving all of those different tints visible. And we can use this to create a lot of interesting different patterns. And once we have our paste on the canvas, we can even take just some paint on our palette knife and apply it here on top. The paint mixes into the paste very easily, and the common mistake here is working the paste too much, causing you to lose the tints and just resulting in a messy, almost uniform color. If that happens, don't worry, fix it by adding some fresh paste or paint on top, or just scrape that part off and start again.